So before we get started, please can you recite Surah Fatiha for Raza Ja'far and Faiz Ahmad. Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعمه العادون ولا يودي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بغض الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود وترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسكر ميدان الأرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين بالقاسم محمد
اللهم صل على
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أعدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we're all aware, we're gathered here tonight to commemorate the Shahadat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the second Imam, Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And inshallah, we'll look at the lives of both of these personalities as much as I can do within the next 45 minutes to an hour. But the personality that I want to spend the most amount of time on is the Holy Prophet himself. Why? Because when it comes to Islam, no Muslim will disagree with the fact that this is one personality that all of us agree on. It doesn't matter what school of thought you belong to, but the Holy Prophet is that personality every single Muslim believes on. But there's a different way that all of us believe in him within the schools of thought. For example, we Shias, we look at the Holy Prophet from a different perspective, whereas the Ahlul Sunnah, they look at the Holy Prophet from a different perspective. What do I mean by that? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The Ahlul Sunnah, they say that the Holy Prophet is just like you and I. He's just like you and I. Whereas we Shias, we say no, there's a difference between him and us. How do we know what that difference is? What is that difference? When you look at the biography of the Holy Prophet, and you look at the biography of all the Imams, whatever they say becomes hujjat on the followers, yes or no? Yes. Whatever they do becomes hujjat on the followers. Whatever they refrain us from, it becomes wajib for us to refrain from. Whatever it is they tell us to do, it becomes wajib for us to do. Correct? Now, if I was to do something, is that hujjat on every other Muslim? No. If I was to say something, is that hujjat on every other Muslim? No. Correct? So how is the Holy Prophet just like me then? His aqwal, his af'al, his words, his actions, his deed become hujjat on everyone. Whereas my words, my actions are only and only hujjat upon me. That's it. Myself, that's it. 1. 2, when we look at the Holy Prophet, when we look at the A'imma al-Islam, we keep in mind the Nurani aspect of these personalities and the Jismani aspect. We keep in mind that Nurani aspect in the sense that we all have this narration that the Holy Prophet, Shia Sunnis, the Holy Prophet has said what? that He created me 40,000 years before He created Adam. He created me 40,000 years before He created Adam. If He created the Holy Prophet 40,000 years before He created Nabiullah Adam, then in what state was the Holy Prophet in? He wasn't in a Jismani state. He was in a Nurani state. And the problem within the Muslims is that the Ahl Sunnah, they left this Nurani aspect of the Holy Prophet. They've just clung on to this Jismani aspect. The problem with some of the Shias is that they've left the Jismani aspect of, for example, Amir al-Mu'mineen, and they've clung on to the Nurani aspect. And this is where there comes a difference. When you just look at the Holy Prophet from that Nurani aspect, when you look at the Aimah from that Nurani aspect, then that's when you become Ghali. Then that's when you start saying that these are Allah. Then that's when you start saying that these are the children of Allah. So this is what happened with Christianity. They looked at Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam from that Nurani aspect, from that spiritual, from that light aspect. They forgot about his Jismani aspect. And because they only saw that Nurani aspect, they started claiming that Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam is either the Son of God or God Himself. And you see that this is what happened within some of the Shias. They looked at Amir al-Mu'mineen only from that Nurani aspect, and they started claiming that he is God. This is when you and I, we need to look at both aspects. When you look at both aspects, then you come to realize that these personalities are not just like you and me. They're different. They're different. One of the worst things that's happened within Islam is what? Is that of all the prophets and all the communities that belong to those prophets, the Islamic community is the only community that claims that their prophet was illiterate. The Muslims are the only community that claims that their prophet was illiterate. How is that possible? How is that possible? When Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam, he came to this world. Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam, what does he know? He knows not to suckle. He knows not to drink the milk of those women that aren't his mother. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what in the Quran for Nabiullah Musa? He said that we made it haram for him to suckle the milk of other women. In the cradle, Nabiullah Musa knows haram and halal. And the Holy Prophet, he doesn't know anything. Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam, when he comes to this world, what does he say? He's only a few hours old. He says, Inni Abdullah, Atani al-Kitab wa Ja'alani Nabiya. Nabiullah Isa, he's only a few hours old, and he says, I am the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam, he knows, 2 hours old, he knows that he is a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Holy Prophet, whose status is greater than Nabiullah Isa, he doesn't know until he's 40. Nabiullah Isa, he says what? He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made me a prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me a book. Where was that book? Where was that book that Nabiullah Isa had? Did he come with a book from the skies? No. That book was in the form of knowledge in the heart, in the spirit of Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam. It was in the form of knowledge. And it's the same with the Holy Prophet. This is a shame for the Muslims. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does it, this verse that I started this lecture off with, this verse is a dua of Hazrat Ibrahim and Hazrat Ismail. It's a supplication. After they rose the Kaaba, sallallahu alaihi wa Muhammad. After they rose the Kaaba, Nabiullah Ibrahim and Nabiullah Ismail, they prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what did they say? Rabbana wab'as fihim rasulan. Ya Allah, raise up amongst them a Rasul, a messenger. What will he do? Yatlu alayhim ayatika. This messenger, He will tell them your ayat. He'll tell them your message. And what else will he do? He will teach them the book. He will teach them the book. What is this? A dua of Nabiullah Ibrahim and Nabiullah Ismail. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 129. Correct? Where do you get the answer to this dua? Surah Al-Jum'ah. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in Surah Al-Jum'ah? هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ. The same exact words that Nabiullah Ibrahim and Ismail used, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses those same exact words. But what I want to focus on is this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this prophet, he will teach the people. He will teach the people. Can you teach someone if you yourself are uneducated? Can you teach someone if you yourself are illiterate? No. If I'm illiterate, how can I teach others? This is a shame that the Muslims, they think that their prophet was illiterate. One, it's against what the Quran says. Logically, it's against what the Quran says. But if you want a verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? In Surah Al-Najm, وَعَلَّمَهُ شَدِيدُ الْقُوَّةِ. Allamahu, this zamir of who? It goes back to the Holy Prophet. Who taught him? Allamahu. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shadidul Quwwa is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shadidul Quwwa is the one who taught the Holy Prophet. When the Quran itself says that it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that taught the Holy Prophet, then how is it that the Muslims claim that the Holy Prophet was illiterate? One of the biggest injustices that's happened to the Holy Prophet, where his ummah claims that he is illiterate. Astaghfirullah. Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, there's a narration from him where the Holy Prophet, he tells Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, get me a pen and paper. This isn't the same narration about Black Thursday. No, this is a different narration. The Holy Prophet, he asks Amir al-Mu'mineen pen and paper. Amir al-Mu'mineen gives him pen and paper. He starts writing. He starts writing. And the Holy Prophet says, there will be people from my ummah that think I'm illiterate. But that's not the case. No prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes to this world illiterate. All the prophets, they're teachers. Their job is to teach. So how do you come to this world without knowing anything? The hadith of Black Thursday itself, what is that hadith? If you pick up Bukhari, if you pick up Muslim and you look at that hadith, what does, pay attention to the words. The Holy Prophet says what? He says, bring me a pen and paper so that I may write to you. So that I may write to you. If the Holy Prophet could not read and write, why is he asking for pen and paper so that he may write? The narration.
Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ana wa aliyun min nurin wahid. Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali. Salawat.
Inshallah, this hadith that the brother just recited, we'll get to that hadith too, what that hadith truly means. Because that hadith, it goes with the very famous narration of the Holy Prophet, where he says what? He says, Awwaluna Muhammad, Akhiruna Muhammad, Awsatuna Muhammad, Kulluna Muhammad. We're all Muhammad. What does that mean? Does that mean in the Jismani aspect they're Muhammad? Or in the Ruhani aspect, in the Nurani aspect they're Muhammad? We'll get to that. But this is a great injustice that's happened to the Holy Prophet, where his ummah, the people that believe him, say that he was illiterate. A non-Muslim can come to the Muslims and they put forward this argument, your prophet was illiterate, my prophet, your Quran says my prophet, Nabiullah Isa alayhi salam, he testifies that he's been given the book at the age of 2 hours. Yet your prophet did not even know that he was a prophet until he was 40 years old. What will the Muslims say? How is this possible? This injustice, and if you look at history This is exactly what Banu Umayyah did. Why? Because they knew the status of the Holy Prophet and his family, and they knew the status of their own family. Especially in the time of Muawiyah, where Amir al-Mu'mineen was being cursed from every single member that was under the control of Muawiyah. Where hadiths were being made up, to the point where there are narrations that state that Muawiyah, he paid 10,000 dinar for fake hadiths. 10,000 dinar. And people would gladly accept. Making up lies. In the name of religion. One. If we look at the character of the Holy Prophet, what do we find? You find that at that time, this battle that happened between the Holy Prophet and, for example, Abu Sufyan, the battle that happened between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Muawiyah, the battle that happened between Abu Abdullah al-Husayn al-Islam and Yazid. Do you know what this battle is mainly about? The Quran, it says that this human being, there are times when this human being, their soul, Nafs al-Ammara and Nafs al-Lawama. Nafs al-Ammara is that soul that constantly tells this human being to do evil, constantly pushes this human being to do bad. Nafs al-Ammara. Nafs al-Lawama is that soul that tells this human being, no, you have to do good. You shouldn't do bad. And if we were to look at this from a psychological point of view, and if anyone's taking psychology, they would know that Freud, what does he say? He says that we have the id, the ego, and superego. The ego is just between the id and superego. What does the id do? It wants you to do something bad. What does the superego do? It says, no, you shouldn't do that. Why? Because it's going to cause this, it's going to cause this, it's going to cause this. If you look at it from that perspective, the Nafs al-Ammara, Nafs al-Lawama, they're somewhat similar. Okay? But this battle is constantly happening within this human being. This human being is constantly thinking of either doing good or bad. Correct? And if you look at, for example, Sayyid Khomeini's books, where he talks about making yourself better, he says the same thing. He says that there's a battle that's constantly happening. If you want to see that battle outside in the Kharij, you look at the battle between the Holy Prophet and Abu Sufyan. You look at the battle between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Muawiyah. You look at the battle between Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam and Yazid alayhi. Why? Because on one side, you constantly have Nafs al-Ammara that is constantly telling people to rise up against the rightful rulers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Constantly telling people to do bad. On the other side, you have Nafs al-Lawama in the form of the Holy Prophet, in the form of Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the form of Abu Abdullah al-Husayn al-Islam. So what's happening? You're seeing this battle that's constantly happening within this human being. Now you're seeing it out in the open. You're seeing it out in the open. And that's what happened to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn al-Islam. That's what happened with Imam Hassan al-Islam. Many people, they might think, well, if that's the case, then it's Nafs al-Ammara that won. No, Nafs al-Ammara did not win. Why? Because to this day, we keep hearing Ya Hussein, but we don't hear Ya Yazid. To this day, we keep hearing Ya Hussein, but we don't hear Ya Yazid. So how is it that Nafs al-Ammara won? It's Nafs al-Lawama that won that battle. Until the day of judgment. The Holy Prophet's grandson. We get to this narration that me and Ali are from one Noor. This Noor, what was this Noor? The Holy Prophet himself, he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he created my Noor. From my Noor, he created the Arsh. And because he created the Arsh from my Noor is greater than the Arsh. Why? Because my Noor directly comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he goes on to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the angels from Amir al-Mu'mineen's Noor. Amir al-Mu'mineen's nur is greater than the angel's nur. Why? Because Amir al-Mu'mineen's nur comes from my nur. He goes on to say the same about Imam Hassan alayhi salam, the same about Lady Zahra, the same about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. These personalities, they have this nurani aspect that you should look at. But at the same time, they have this jismani aspect that you should also look at. Why? Because if they did not have that jismani aspect, how are they going to guide the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them to guide? For them to come down to this world, a jism was necessary. What do I mean? The angels, what are they created from? Nur. They're created from light, correct? When they come down to this materialistic world, do they not take on an appearance? A physical appearance? Why is that? Because now for them to come from that realm to this realm, they need to take on, it needs to be a physical appearance. Why? Because this realm, this world that we live in is a physical world. When they come down to this world, they take on a physical form. When they go back up to the realm that they're from, that physical form ceases to exist and they go back into that nurani form. The same way when the Holy Prophet came down to this world, he took on a physical form. When he goes back to Miraj, it's a nurani form. It's a nurani form when he goes to Miraj. But you and I, can we do that same Miraj as the Holy Prophet? No. But the majority of Muslims, the Holy Prophet is just like you and me. How so? The Miraj of a mu'min is salat. The Miraj of a mu'min is prayer. How many of you can say that you've gone to Miraj while you pray? What does that mean that the Miraj of a mu'min is prayer? It means that during prayer, you're connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or you should be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which most of us aren't. Whenever we come for prayer, our minds are everywhere else but Allah. My sons, my daughters, I have a test tomorrow. My work, I have to get to work. What am I going to do? This happened today. Everything but prayers. So then how are we supposed to go to those other realms? That's when this eye, that's when all of this that exists in front of our eyes, we need to completely ignore it and say there's nothing that exists except for Allah. When we have this mentality that there's nothing that exists except for Allah, now when we go to pray, that prayer will have a different meaning. Before we even say that, we need to look at the representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at the way the Holy Prophet prayed. To the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Holy Prophet, what? قُمِ اللَّيْلِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Oh my messenger, he prayed so much. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, the one who has that laqab of Zainul Abidin, he's the one who says that my grandfather Rasulillah used to pray so much at night that his feet used to swell. His feet used to swell. The Holy Prophet, this is the status of the Holy Prophet. Because of this status of Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave up the Holy Prophet, all of the prophets that came to this world, what were they doing? You all know? They all wanted the riza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They all wanted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be content with them. They all wanted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be happy with them. But when it comes to the Holy Prophet, it's the other way around. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the Holy Prophet to be content with him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the Holy Prophet to be happy with him. Why? What do I mean? When it came time for the Qibla to change, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh my Prophet, we'll change the Qibla. Just so what? You can be razi. 123,000 999 prophets, they've come to this world for the riza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This last prophet was sent, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling this prophet, oh my prophet, I want you to be razi with me. I want you to be content with me. I want you to be happy with me. This is the status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the Holy Prophet. And the Muslims have given him something completely different. Something to the point where a lot of the Muslims, they cast doubt. Forget Jibreel alayhi salam. If you ask some of the Muslims, what do they say? These Shias are kafir. Why are they kafir? Oh, because they claim, what? That Jibreel, he made a mistake. What mistake did he make? The mistake that he made was they claimed that he was supposed to bring the revelations to Ali, but he accidentally took them to Muhammad. MashaAllah. I don't know which Shia claims that. But this itself, how old was the Holy Prophet when the first revelation came? 40 years old. How old was Ali when that first revelation came? 10 years old. Does Jibreel not know the difference between a 40-year-old and 10-year-old? Does Jibreel not know how a 40-year-old looks and how a 10-year-old looks? That we are claiming that Jibreel made this mistake? It becomes absurd out of just hatred. Why? Because we've clung on to who? The Ahlul Bayt. We've clung on to the family of Rasulullah. Whereas they have clung on to the companions. We've clung on to those personalities whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, he says what? He says that I have purified you a thorough purification. That verse of Tathir, it was not revealed for anyone except for these 5 personalities. So that means the companions can be wrong. That means the companions can make mistakes. And when you look at history, you see what kind of mistakes they made. One companion cursing out another. When you look at the Quran itself, you have verses of the Quran that are condemning who? Who are they condemning, please? The companions. The Quran was revealed 1400 years ago. The reason for the revelation of each verse was either something a companion did, if it was good, then it was in what? Condemnation or in support. It was in support. If a companion did something good, it was in support. If a companion did something bad, it was in condemnation. All the verses were either revealed for one of those companions that did something good or something bad. So then how are all the companions the same? How are all the companions on an equal footing? How? When the prophets themselves, all Muslims, they agree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, 124,000 prophets. Of those 124,000 prophets, there's some that are Rasuls. Of those Rasuls, of those messengers, there are 5 that are Ulul Azam. There are 5 that are the greatest. Of those 5 that are the greatest, there's one that is the greatest. When their darajat, when their levels, when the prophets themselves are not all at an equal footing, then how can you and I be all at an equal footing? How can someone who served Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all his life be equal to someone who accepted Islam 10 years ago? No. But can that person that accepted Islam 10 years ago get far in life? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. You look at a lot of the companions of the Holy Prophet, what were they? They were converts. They were converts. In Mecca, they were all converts. In Medina, they were converts. The only Muslims that existed at that time, born Muslim, the Holy Prophet from Banu Hashim, that was it. Everyone else was convert. You look at Salman Farsi, the narrations, they differ about how old he is. Regardless, 80 years old, 100 years old, 300 years old, that doesn't matter. But the narrations do state that he was Christian before he became Muslim. He became Muslim. But he reached such a high status where the Holy Prophet says, Salman minna Ahlul Bayt. Salman minna Ahlul Bayt. This is what the Holy Prophet came to do. To teach people about Islam. You look at the life of the Holy Prophet and you ask yourself, how much of that life am I implementing in my own life today? A lot of people, they come and ask, say, what can we do? What can we do, for example, for our afterlife? The Holy Prophet has already given you something to do. For leaving namaz, leaving salat, leaving prayer, all of this aside. The Holy Prophet has said, look, when an individual dies, all of his amal, all of his actions are complete except for three things. They will continue as long as those are continuing in the world. And they ask him, Ya Rasulullah, what are those? He says, first is if this person has left some knowledge in the world. If this person has left some knowledge that people are benefiting from, then as long as people are benefiting from that knowledge, he will continue to reap the rewards of it. Correct? Who are the people that end up leaving knowledge? Scholars. Either in the form of scientists, for example, you look at Einstein. Humanity has benefited from his knowledge. Regardless of what his religion was, humanity has gained from his knowledge. Correct? 1. 2. Any khair that an individual had done in their lifetime. Any khair, meaning that, for example, there's a mosque that needs to be built. If you help and you give money for the building of that mosque, the Holy Prophet says what? As long as that mosque exists, you will continue to reap the reward of that mosque even after you pass away. Even after you pass away. 2. 3 is if you've left Amal Saleh, kids that will do dua for you. They'll do dua for you. Say now we don't have kids. If you don't have kids, then 1 and 2 you can still do. We're not scientists. If you're not scientists, then do number 2. Give them, give the mosque, give for building, give for khairat. If you have kids, then teach them the path of the Ahlul Bayt, so even after you're gone, you will continue to reap the rewards. Why? Because they'll continue to pray on your behalf. Continue to pray on your behalf. Become scientists, become scholars. Why? So then humanity can benefit from you. All of this that's happening today, is it just for the Westerners? The advancements that's happening in science, in technology, in chemistry, and biology, is it just for the Westerners? Or is it for the Muslims also? It's also for the Muslims. Go into these fields. Become a beacon of light for Islam. Tell the world that we Muslims, when the Western Hemisphere was in its dark ages, we Muslims were in our golden era. Now, the Western Hemisphere is coming back to the dark ages. Yes, there's advancement in science and technology, but when it comes to spirituality, there's absolutely nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Tell the world. This is what the Holy Prophet taught us. This is what the Holy Prophet did himself. For example, when it comes to his charity, the Holy Prophet, he asked Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, Ya Ali, can you buy me a shirt? He gives him 12 dirhams. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he goes to the store and he buys a shirt that costs exactly 12 dirhams. He comes back and he gives the shirt to Rasulullah. Rasulullah, he says, Ya Ali, the shirt is too expensive. The shirt is too expensive. Can you go back to the market and ask if he will give the money back? Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, Ya Rasulullah, I'll go back to the market, but I don't know if he'll give the money back. So he goes back to the market, he tells the shopkeeper that Rasulullah, he's saying that the shirt is too expensive. Can you give the money back? The man, he gives the 12 dirhams back. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he comes back with the 12 dirhams and he gives it to Rasulullah. Rasulullah, he comes with Amir al-Mu'mineen to buy a shirt now. On their way, they find a little slave girl. she's crying. When she's crying, Rasulullah asked her, why is it that you're crying? And she said, Ya Rasulullah, I had come out, my master had given me some money to buy some milk, and I spilled the milk. And now if I go back, I know that he's going to get mad. Rasulullah, he gives this girl 4 coins. Then he goes to the market. When he goes to the market, what does he do? He buys a shirt for 4 dirham. When he buys that shirt for 4 dirham, he comes back. Now how much does he still have left? Out of a total of 12 dirham, he still has 4 dirhams left. He gave 4 to the little girl, he used 4 for the shirt. Now he has 4 left. On his way back, he sees an old man. And the old man, he says, if anyone can give me clothes on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them clothes. The Holy Prophet, what does he do? He gives him a shirt. When he gives him a shirt, he goes back to the market, he buys another shirt for 4 dirham. Look at the way the Holy Prophet is thinking, and look at what he's trying to teach us. And look at what we do. That 12 dirham became useful for a slave girl where her master does not abuse her. That 12 dirham became useful for an old man who was given clothes. And that 12 dirham became useful for the Holy Prophet himself. 12 dirham became useful for 3 people. 12 dirham became useful for 3 people. Yet, we'll spend how much on a shirt? $30, $40, $50, doesn't matter. No one's saying that it's haram. No. But what the Holy Prophet is teaching us is if you can help 3 people with that same amount of money and still have a good shirt on you, why not help 3 people instead of just 1? That's what the Holy Prophet is teaching us. This is what we're supposed to understand from these personalities. How to be a human being. Not just think about ourselves, but think about everyone else also. Think about everyone. We're living in this society, we're so engrossed in just us, trying to make ourselves better. Or else we forget about everyone else. Amir al-Mu'mineen, as soon as Mal al-Ghanimat was brought, what did he used to do? He used to distribute it. That's it. He used to distribute it. To the point where there's some narrations where Amir al-Mu'mineen, he used to give his servant money. And this servant, he constantly saved it, he constantly saved it, he constantly saved it, he constantly saved it. He would constantly save it. And one time Amir al-Mu'mineen, he found out, and Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he finds out that he's been constantly saving money like this, he gets mad at him. And some of the narrations say that it was Qambar. He says, Qambar, if you had this money, why did you get more from Mal al-Ghanimat? Why did you ask for more from the treasury? You already had this money. Wouldn't it have been better if you had given this money to others? This is what Amir al-Mu'mineen is teaching. You look at Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Who was it that betrayed Imam Hassan? Do you all know? Where the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back, this phrase. Who was it that after the betrayal, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he had nothing else to do except to do sulh with Muawiyah? When your own cousin betrays you, when your own blood betrays you, then what are you going to do? When your own family betrays you. Imam Hassan. And when we come to Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam, you see that there's a stark difference between his companions and the companions of Imam Hassan, of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and the Holy Prophet. Stark difference. What is that difference? The people that used to go to the battle with the Holy Prophet, with Amir al-Mu'mineen, with Imam Hassan, they used to go to the battle for what? Do you all know? For the loot after the war, that's it. They used to go to battle for the loot. To the point where in one of the battles, one of these companions of the Holy Prophet, he comes, the Holy Prophet had not seen him. But he comes to the Holy Prophet, he hadn't seen him for a while, but he comes to the Holy Prophet and he tells the Holy Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, do you give me permission to go fight? The Holy Prophet said yes. His intention up until that time was fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As soon as he goes towards the battle, he sees that on the other side is an enemy that's sitting on a very beautiful donkey. On a very beautiful donkey. And his intention changes from fi sabilillah to fi sabilil himad. His intention changes from for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sake of that donkey. To the point where the companions of the Holy Prophet, Shia narrations, Sunni narrations, this is a companion of the Holy Prophet. He's going to battle for the sake of a donkey. Where the Holy Prophet, he says that this person, he's going to be killed. And when he gets killed, it's not going to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's going to be killed for the sake of that donkey. So how's this companion at the same level as Amir al-Mu'mineen? How's this companion at the same level as Ammar al-Yasir? How's this companion at the same level as, for example, all these other companions, Salman Farsi? But these companions would go to the battle for what? For the loot that they would get. All of the companions of Abu Abdullah Hussein al-Islam, they were in Karbala not to get anything. They were in Karbala to give. They were in Karbala to give. What is it that they were giving? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that you cannot reach bir, you cannot reach goodness until you give from what you love. You cannot reach goodness until you give from what you love. This goodness, this bir, if you look at Al-Burhan fi Tafsir al-Quran by Sayyid Hashim Bahrani, he has a narration from Imam Sadiq alayhi that says that we are that bir. You cannot reach us until you give from what you love. You can't reach Ahlul Bayt until you give from what you love. There was a companion of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he was bringing money, khums money to the Imam. When he was bringing khums money to the Imam, he looks at his companion and he says to him that we don't take this money because we're in need of it. We don't take this money because we're in need of it. We take this money because it purifies our Shias. It purifies their amal. It purifies their deeds in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why we take it. And Imam, he points to this verse and he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that you will not reach bir, you will not reach goodness. We are that goodness. You won't reach us until you give from what you love. Tell me, in Karbala, what was it that they loved? They had no money. They had no goods. The only thing that they had was what each and every single one of us loves, which is our life. Our life, we see that, or we find that it's more valuable than money. Every individual, they believe that their life is more valuable than money. Those companions of Imam Hussein al-Islam, they were ready to give their life. To the point where the narrations, they say that the night of Ashur, Imam Hussein al-Islam, he calls all of them. And he says to them one by one, do you want to see your state in heaven? Do you want to see your state in heaven? Habib, he sees a state. Saeed, he sees a state. Joan, he sees a state. All of them, they start to see their state. Then he's looking at Abu Fazl Abbas alayhi salam, and he says, Abbas, do you not want to see your state in heaven? Look at the answer Abu Fazl Abbas alayhi salam gives. He says, Mawla, my heaven is wherever you're at. My heaven is wherever you're at. If you're here on this earth is my heaven. If you're up in the skies, then that sky will be my heaven. If you read the sermon of Abul Fazl Abbas alayhi salam, in that sermon at the end, what does he say? This is something for everyone to remember. In that sermon, he says that I've already sacrificed myself for Abu Abdullah Hussein. The sermon that he gave on 8th of Zul-Hijjah, at the end he says, I've already sacrificed myself. He's still alive, but he's already sacrificed himself for the sake of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. If you want to be of service to Imam Zaman, then from now on you need to already sacrifice yourself for Imam Zaman. You need to sacrifice yourself for Imam Zaman. What does that mean to sacrifice? Everything that you do would be for the pleasure of Imam Zaman. Why? Because when Imam Zaman alayhi salam is pleased, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased. This is what it means to be of service to the Imam of the time. Brothers and sisters, you look at the Holy Prophet, the narration that I read, where he says that 3 things will benefit you even after you leave this world. One of those 3 things, the Holy Prophet says what? Was that an offspring that's been left that will do good. The Quran, it says what? That Hassan and Hussein are the sons of Rasulullah. Lady Zahra is physically the daughter of Rasulullah. You look at the offspring that the Holy Prophet left behind, and you look at what the Holy Prophet said to the Islamic Ummah regarding this offspring, and you look at what the Islamic Ummah did to this offspring, you realize that hypocrisy was still in the hearts of these companions of the Holy Prophet. You realize that Iman had still not completely entered the hearts of these individuals. Why? Because if Iman had completely entered that heart, then they would not have brought fire to the doorsteps of Lady Zahra. If Iman had completely entered their hearts, then they would not have left Imam Hassan alayhi salam alone. If Iman had completely entered their hearts, then they would not have come and fought against Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. They would not. And you look at the narrations when Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam was leaving Medina. Do you know what the companions of the Holy Prophet were saying to him? Ya Hussein, don't leave. Abu Abdullah, they know that he's leaving. Abu Abdullah Hussein, he says, no, this is something that I have to do. When he says this, then they say, Ya Hussein, if you're going to go, if you have to go, then can you leave behind Ali al-Akbar? Why? Because every time we look at companion of the Holy Prophet, every time we look at him, we're reminded of Rasulullah. We're reminded of Rasulullah. And it's these companions that know the Holy Prophet, these companions that have memorized the Quran, that are in Karbala fighting against Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. What is the point of memorizing the Quran if you don't know the meaning of it? What is the point? But you look at the tragedy that happened to the Ahlul Bayt. Do you all know where it starts? It starts with the loss of Rasulullah. It starts with the loss of Rasulullah. And when you look at the loss of Rasulullah, you see that on that night, when the Holy Prophet was on his deathbed, there's a knock at the door. When there's a knock at the door, Lady Zahra herself, she says that there was a knock at the door and I didn't want to answer it. The Holy Prophet, he tells me, Ya Zahra, go see who it is. She goes to the door and she hears a salam. When she hears the salam, she says, what is it that you want? The person on the other side, they say that they want to meet Rasulullah. Lady Zahra, she says that he's resting right now. Lady Zahra, she goes back. The knock happens again. When it happens, she says the same thing. When it happens a third time, that's when Rasulullah, he looks at Lady Zahra and he asks, Ya Zahra, who is it at the door? And she says to him, Ya Rasulullah, I don't know who it is, but every time they knock, my heart it's not feeling at ease. Rasulullah, he says, do you know why that is? And she replies, why is it, Rasulullah? And he says, Ya Zahra, that is the angel of death. He will not come into this house without your permission. The angel of death will not even enter this house without your permission. And you see that it was at this door that fire was brought to. It was at this door that the Muslims entered without the permission of Lady Zahra. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayki ya Siddiqat Fatima. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Sallallahu alayka ya Gharib al-Ghuraba. Ya Aba Abdullah al-Husayn. Brothers and sisters, it was after the loss of Rasulullah, that's when the tragedy of Lady Zahra started. It's Lady Zahra who's crying over her father. But Ya Zahra, there's no one that is stopping you from crying over your father. When we come to Karbala, we see that there's a 6-year-old girl that's crying over her father. But every time she says, oh father dear, every time she says, Ya Hussein, she gets slapped by Shimon. Every time she cries for her father, she gets struck with a spear. Every time she cries for her father, she gets hit with something. And this, Ya Zahra, this is your granddaughter, Sakina. This was Zahra, brothers and sisters, who says that after the tragedy of Rasulullah, after the loss of Rasulullah, that these types of masa'ib that fell upon me, that if they were to fall upon the days, these days would have turned into nights. But Ya Zahra, these were the masa'ib that fell upon you. Look at the masa'ib that fell upon your daughter Zainab. Look at the masa'ib that fell upon your granddaughter, Lady Sakina. Brothers and sisters, it's the same Sakina. When the tents were being burned, when she runs out of those tents, it's Shimr Lale. What is he doing? He snatches at the earlobes of Lady Sakina to take out the earrings. And the narrations, they state that when he snatched those earrings, there was blood that was dripping from these earrings. And Hamid ibn Mosavi says that it was nighttime, and I see that there's a little girl that's coming towards me. When this little girl comes towards me, I go towards her. And when I go towards her, she puts her hands together. She says, oh kind sir, I have nothing left to give you. Everything I had, they've stolen from me, they've taken from me. Hamid, he writes that, oh my little daughter, I'm not here to take anything from you, but I'm here to just put out the fire that's on your libas. I'm here to just put out the fire that's on your clothes. When he does this, that's when Sakina, she puts her hands together and she says to him, oh kind sir, can you do me one more favor? Can you tell me the direction to Najaf? When he says, why do you want to go to Najaf? She replies that my grandfather Ali is in Najaf. I'm going to complain to him about what they did to my father. And when he says that Najaf is that way, this little girl, she starts going to Najaf and she keeps saying, Ya Jaddi, and she goes to Najaf. And Hamid ibn Mosavi says, when she was going to that direction, I see that there was a person who comes from the direction of Najaf, and he picks up this little girl and he says to her, oh my little daughter, where are you going? That's when Shakina, she says to him, I'm going to Najaf. Why are you going to Najaf? Because my grandfather Ali is in Najaf. That's when this man, he says, may your grandfather be sacrificed for you. By this time, brother, sister, Lady Zainab, she had reached this spot. When she reached this spot, she looks at that man. He's holding Sakina in her arms, and she says to this man, oh kind sir, thank you for finding this daughter of Hussein. She's the most beloved of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam. I had found all of the children, and I was in search of this little girl. That's when this man, he puts Sakina on the ground and he says just one time, Zainab. When he says Zainab, Lady Zainab, she turns around and she says, oh man, oh sir, how do you know who I am? How do you know who I am? That's when Amir al-Mu'mineen, he takes off the niqab and he says, oh my daughter Zainab. When he says, oh my daughter Zainab, Lady Zainab, she starts to cry and she says, oh father dear, now you come. Oh father dear, I was calling you when they slaughtered Abu Abdullah. I called you when they slaughtered Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. I was calling you when they slaughtered Ali al-Akbar, but you never came. But now you have come. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Mata Hussein.